Now, Hilary joins us now, as she usually does. I see you've been elevated to Associate Minister of Justice. Gosh, when did that happen, Hilary?
Yes, I was quite impressed, but no, not really. No, they were
You
very
realise if
careful
you
with
had have been, you would be able to keep the prefix. So even if you are a minister outside of cabinet for a period of months, you can go through life with the honourable affixed to you forever. Did you know that?
Actually, that's not quite true. I don't usually get to correct you on parliamentary things, which you know everything about and I know nothing about. But the reason I know that that's not quite true, or to put it another way, Rodney Hyde could stop that happening to Heather
Oh,
Roy,
well, that's different. You've got, yes, if somebody intercedes and says, no, he can't have it, yeah, that's different. So the party leader stopped that, did he?
which was, I thought, a mean-spirited. I mean, he didn't achieve it, I don't think, in the end, but I thought that was rather mean-spirited of Rodney.
Oh, is she not the Honourable Heather Roy now?
Yes, she is, but he either threatened to or tried to or
So I'm not wrong
attempted to
then, just quietly.
stop her. What I'm saying is it isn't automatic. Rodney could have stopped her, I think. He could have intervened and said, you can't be. And he was going to.
Okay, but he didn't in the end, because she is now still the Honourable Heather
Yes,
Roy, I see.
that's right.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
but it's not irrevocably automatic.
Gosh, you were a different
So
party act in those days, weren't they? When it had Heather Roy and
they,
Rodney Hyde.
they were. I was on the Justice Committee and um, I was able to get involved in some legislation which I made some small differences to, with Simon Power being the minister, which I thought was, considering I was new and a backbencher and from the wrong place and things, that was something I enjoyed. Anyway, yes, I do have an interest in justice, if that's
Okay.
what somebody was saying.
Now,
Um, yeah.
I'm also interested in, listen, I've just got to take a quick break now, and then I'll come back to you on the issues that you want to discuss. We're just going to take a quick break. One of the things that you sent that you wanted to talk about was the Otago Daily Times have published if you like, a league table for NCEA results for last year. For that, they've got it under the Official Information Act, I think, for NCEA level 2, 3, and also university entrance passes from the examinations from last year. Oh, well, from the courses that were taught from last year, because some of these won't necessarily be exam based for 2024. They've ranked them from the bottom to the top. So I think the top was St Hilda's Collegiate, well, or Columba, and then St Hilda's. So that's how it ranks across those two. And the bottom, Aurora College, and Aurora College for all three of those, which is a co-ed school, I think, in Southland or Invercargill from memory. Anyhow, you drew that to my attention. Why?
I drew that to your attention because I thought it was interesting in two respects, and I think I'd be interested to know how true it is throughout the rest of the country. There's a word of caution, but that some schools don't have people all entering the fray, as it were, or they've selected them out by the time they get to some levels. So the absolute ones aren't necessarily, in some respects, the UE level may be more indicative of excellence in teaching. But the two of the schools changed significantly over the from the year before, made a big difference to their people. And there's a lot of students that would be involved in having passed something that they hadn't been previously expected to pass. And what the principal said, because if we know anything, we know it's about the leadership of the school, that they had actually concentrated on learning stuff, and I would call it rote learning stuff at that level.
All right. So just to give some background to people because they won't know what you're talking about, but I do. There are two schools that were itemised there that had improved. One of them was Kaikoura Valley High School, which was a co-ed school, relatively low roll as a result of people not wanting to go there and poor results in the past. And the other was East Otago High School, which is, I think, a school in Palmerston, which is a small town just north of Dunedin. And their results have improved dramatically over the last year. And ta-da. So now I've got the context. You're saying that the principals were interviewed and they say what? Why did they improve?
They say they improved because they were actually getting a solid foundation into the kids and teaching them basic learning basic stats and things.
So they changed their teaching style.
They changed their, and this one, in one case at least, it was a new principal. I don't know about the other one, but he was saying that he considered it to be a direct result of trying to do something differently. And what he was doing was not rocket science to the rest of us. Old school learning is how he described it. They're trying to focus on the children and the children learning things. But he said, sometimes in our endeavour to provide a modern education, we forget what has worked well in the past. I think there's nothing wrong with the good parts of old school. We need to refocus on that. Yeah. Old school repetitive learning.
Yep. So you can't actually start thinking creatively unless you've got the building blocks in place in the first place.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed I've ended up buying my grandchildren a times table chart for their walls. It's a typical grandmothery thing to do, because it turns out that the curriculum doesn't appear to have, at least I checked it up to about the age of 9 or 10, times tables as, there's 3 lots of times tables they learn before that. 1 times, which is nothing, and I think it's 2 times and 10 times, which, 2 times is pretty marginal and 10 times is, but I thought they should all learn all the times tables and they should be knowing them, but by the age of 9 or 10, I'd have thought they could just immediately recite them.
Rattle them off. Yep.
But quite clearly they don't do them in any sort of consistent fashion. And it's fractions are another thing that they don't seem to have sort of got in there somewhere. But I thought it was interesting that you'd think that rote learning-y sort of things might be in the past and whatever, and you wouldn't have thought that would be later high school year utility. No. Yeah. Principals saying, we're just getting back to these basic things. And it was how to learn, not particular things that they were learning.
Did you not, when you studied at school, and I'm thinking back because you're roughly my age, and you're doing, because you're a bright girl, did you not do rote learning in forms 3 or 4 or years 9 and 10? I remember doing it for grammar, I think. Languages was another one. The periodic table for some strange reason. Did you not do that?
Yeah. Might have been done a wee bit of a periodic table, but I remembered it more as a sort of like multiplication level stuff, so as you could immediately say what's 8 7 sort of,
Oh, we learnt that at secondary school, intermediate. But you're saying you learnt it at secondary school. Which school did you go to?
No, I'm saying I think I did it at primary school, but earlier than it wasn't 5th form sort of year or whatever. That's year 13 or year 11.
Yes, but isn't it remarkable? And just to reinforce your point, that in that article, I think it was on the front page of the ODT on Saturday, the Otago Daily Times, as I said, and why every other newspaper in New Zealand isn't doing the same is beyond me, but there you go. there's all the local schools in Otago, Southland, tested for years 12 and 13, over across those, NCEA 2 and 3, UE, results published, straight across the page. Can I ask you a question, though? Is it fair to compare in the way in which they have integrated schools, decile 10, in those particular cases, St Hilda's and Columba, two prestigious girls' schools in Dunedin, with Aurora, a decile 1 school, used to be known as the old Southland Tech or Cargill High School, I think it was, down the bottom. Do you think that's a legitimate ranking?
No, I don't think it is. But East Otago and Kaikoura Valley College, which had had this amazing improvement, are fair to look at and see, because they are actually, that's the school making a difference.
Yeah.
It's not just smart kids, learning what you'd expect smart kids to learn. And there was another thing apart from the rote learning, which I thought was really interesting. Both the principals of these two schools said that they looked at each student. One of them said, I've got an individual plan to get them into courses they wanted to undertake or whatever it is. And the other one, Kaikoura Valley College, said they did a lot of tracking throughout the year with its students to make sure they were on course to achieve their goals for the year. If they weren't on track, they received one-on-one guidance from the pastoral team to rectify the situation. Now, back when we were at school, if you weren't doing what you ought to be doing, there was a bit of intervention to rectify the situation. You pull your head in, get out there, do your work, come back after school if you weren't concentrating, whatever it is. People were noticing whether you were doing what you ought to be doing. And these are two schools saying quite clearly, we are looking at each student and making sure they're doing what they ought to be doing. They were supporting them. They thought it was the school's role to help the children achieve their goals.
Wow.
That's radical.
How radical is that? Yeah, I know. Gosh, who would have
Rather
thought
than
that
just saying that they come from a broken home or what do you expect? Or...
I know. It's absurdity. Elizabeth Rada makes this point on a relatively regular basis. An absurdity to suggest that the old system didn't produce results. It clearly did when we were amongst the best in the world. We've had a new form of teaching, child-centred so-called. Curriculum, you can make that up yourself if you're at primary school because there isn't one. And off you go. And look at the results.
One of the things...
Can I say the other thing I noticed in that? Yep. Here's a question for you, though. If I'm a parent looking at that, and I'm looking at, say, the bottom 4 or 5 schools, would I justifiably be asking questions of the school as to why you're there?